Ken asked this question. He said, you appropriately use forensic tools based on common experience.
Okay.
For example, that conspiracy theories are rarely tenable, let's say 99% of the time, yet common experience also tells us that people who die stay dead 99.99999% of the time. Shouldn't we then have the humility to question our confidence in the less than 100% certain arguments we use to build a case for such an unlikely conclusion?
Okay, so a couple of things. Every case we build, we never use percentages. We never allow jurors to talk in percentages. They'll ask us sometimes, what percentage do I need to be at to be beyond a reasonable doubt? Like, is that like 75% sure? Well, first of all, how in the world would we calculate that percentage? Yeah, we could say it's 99% of the time or 99.9999% of the time. We could say that, but how exactly are we arriving at that percentage point? I mean, in some communities, people would say, well, actually, and I wouldn't agree with this. I'm just saying that some people would say, hey, I think miraculous stuff happens 60% of the time. So is that really? I mean, so how are we going to, because your experience tells you this and my experience says something different. That's why we stay away from percentages. In the end, we're trying to eliminate things that are simply possible and try to focus on those things that are reasonable. Now, look, if you, up front, you've said that I could never accept any supernatural or extranatural cause as reasonable. Okay, then you're not going to accept this explanation. No problem. That's why we do such basically a diligent job of selecting juries. We want to make sure that we don't have somebody who says, hey, I could never be persuaded that this guy is your suspect. He looks just like me. Or I could never be persuaded that he isn't the suspect because he looks like somebody who would kill somebody. We want those people off our jury because we need people who are not so fixed in their position that they aren't even open to the reasonable explanation offered by any other side. And this is true for defense attorneys and for prosecutors. So in the end, if we're somebody who says, hey, I have to be at 100% certainty, or I think up front that the supernatural could be ruled out 99.99999% of the time. Well, we don't know that. That's the thing we're investigating. That's the thing we're trying to determine. And I think what happens here is that every case has more than enough evidence, every case I've ever worked and put in front of a jury, has more than enough evidence for the jury to conclude, to render a verdict. Yet, there's always enough wiggle room for a juror to hang or to say, I'm not going to agree. That's the nature of every case. There's more than enough evidence to draw an inference, but there's also enough wiggle room for somebody to say, I refuse to draw an inference. This is also the case for God, is that there's more than enough evidence to reasonably infer that God exists, but there's also enough wiggle room for people to deny it. And I think that God wants it that way. I think that this is why we don't have we have a God who's a gentleman who's not going to compel belief, because then it wouldn't really be belief. I mean, there's an act of freedom involved in even deciding which is the most reasonable inference. And if I remove that freedom from you by either overwhelming you or by designing you in such a way that you have no choice but to believe one thing or the other, you could call this love, you could call this faith, you could call this belief, but really it's just a pre-programmed, overwhelmed kind of compulsion that that God has put on you. So I think that what we have here is that every case, yes, if you think that there's enough wiggle room to deny these claims, absolutely there is. And can I remove that wiggle room for you? No. And so I'm pretty calm about that. Mm-hmm. My job is to show to the jury. I never say I'm going to prove this to you. Now, my attorneys sometimes say that, but I would never say that.
Gotcha.
I'm going to make a case for this. It may prove it to you, but proof is in the eye of the considerer, or in the head of the considerer. And so I may not be able to prove it to you because that's something that your definition of proof may be so high that I need a 100% certainty, for example, that I'm never going to reach that. I've never reached 100% certainty in any case I've ever tried.
Thanks so much for watching our video. If it was helpful and useful to you, I'd really appreciate it if you would follow us, subscribe to our channel at the bottom link here in the video, and tell your friends. And please follow us on social media.